Welcome back, Mere Mortalites, to another edition of the Mere Mortals Meanderings. We are outside once again, back to some philosophizing in the park. Today, as always, Meanderings, a little bit of a chance to talk about what's been happening, you know, the joys of the world, the sadness of the world, the ideas that we have in between each other. So it is Juan on this corner, we got
Kyron here
on the other side
of the mic.
Cold
Kyron.
But indeed, Kyron comes from a colder place just recently, so I think we could probably just start there as part of the meandering session, because Kyron was down in chilly, breezy old Canberra, which is the capital of Australia, for those who actually aren't aware, who think perhaps it is Sydney, but it is Canberra.
It's Canberra.
Now, I think you went down for a particular reason, to free a certain man.
Yes.
Did you succeed in the task of freeing Julian Assange?
Look, in a certain way, yes, because there was a guy who looked exactly like him.
Oh, okay.
And he was a photographer, and he sort of had this, one of those like wide-brimmed detective hats, maybe from like the 1930s. It wasn't a fedora, but it was that sort of style. Like, it reminded me of that era.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, is Assange actually here taking photos and pretending not to be?
he's managed to evade the world looking for him.
Yeah.
Trying to extradite him and come to Australia purely for the memes. Yeah, just for the memes. Just to punk people out and be like, oh, you know, is it me? Is it not me?
Yeah. He's like, shush.
Okay, but apart from the doppelganger, how was the rest of the sessions?
Unfortunately, no. From what I could tell, there's been no reaction, even though my presence and my brother's presence there was obviously, one of the highlights for the.
Indeed, I'm sure it would be.
A big boon for the organisers, for sure.
You seem to be the youngest ones there. There seem to be some kids in the mix, but you seem to be the youngest ones beside that.
Yeah, so I'll give the full context. Basically, as I was mentioning the other week about spicy chats, our latest spicy chat this last Tuesday was about Canberra, and my dad brought it up, and he was like, look, I want to go to this protest. Like, there's something I would go to, but I don't have the energy now. I don't want to go where it's cold. He was going to take my mum along as well, but it just would have been annoying. And so he was basically saying, like, will you guys go in my stead? If I offer to pay for flights and accommodation, will you go in my stead? I've never been to a protest before, voluntarily. Have you been to one?
I haven't been one voluntarily or involuntarily.
I think you were talking about how you walked past a COVID one and there was a guy jumping on a car.
Yes, that was around the COVID time, but I wouldn't say that was a protest as opposed to just like lunatics walking around the city. But I've never been involved in one voluntarily or involuntarily.
Well, I met some people who close to the fringe, I'd say, while I was there. In any case, for me it was, look, in terms of protests, that's probably right up there with one of the ones I would actually go to if I was ever going to go to one. Just on my own sort of free will. I'm like, what is it? Not intuition. Starts with I. The initiative. If it was going to do it on my own, it would be one like that. Because that's, I think I've talked about in the past how I think Julian Assange essentially did nothing wrong, but
technically he did do something wrong.
Well,
I had this conversation.
Yeah, what's the technical?
Like, technically he did something. He did do something illegal, which is what he is being, chased for, essentially. He's been trying to, like, extradite and charge him, which I do think is releasing confidential information.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, this is where it's like he didn't obtain them. He's a sort of publisher. So he got given documents from Chelsea Manning, who, by the way, is not in jail at the moment.
Correct.
She got pardoned. I feel it's like the things said against him and being chased, and look, I'm going to have this opinion because I was just at a protest where they're obviously on his side. But yeah, look, the idea of going to it wasn't out of the question for me. If it was a protest against mandatory exercise, like I don't know, a protest against I don't know, what else do they have? Chemtrails and shit like that. Okay,
maybe not.
Probably not. And a good friend of ours, Joey the
episode
Joey
5.
Broadshoulders, episode 5. If you want to get it, he's been sending some boostergrams recently as well. He's down there, so I was like, oh, okay. Perfect opportunity for that, and also just to spend time with my brother, because we haven't gone on trip, just him and I before, so it was like, okay, yeah, this would be a good bonding one. So, sort of last spur of the moment was like, all right, yeah, we'll do it. So, yeah, that was on Tuesday evening. Wednesday, I was sort of organising flights. I actually had to make a couple little sacrifices. You know, I missed a gym workout for that day, which I had planned. I missed a Cardano event I was going to go to as well. Had to change a fair few things around, but it's good for the spontaneity, I suppose. So yeah, went down. Cold in Canberra. Yeah, it was probably. I think it was like maximum of 14 degrees during the day, which for me is certainly cold.
Celsius for those folks listening there from America.
Yeah. And yeah, so we basically, me and my brother flew down, checked into the hotel, or left our bags there, and then sort of just wandered around the Canberra main city centre. 400,000 people live.
Not much of it.
There. There's
not much of the city centre.
That we essentially just went into the shopping mall and just spent some time there. As we were going around, we there was an incident there, which I'll recant to you in a little bit, but just a little primer for you, a little foreshadowing.
A little incident.
So there was something there that made us laugh very hard.
Right.
Anyway, we got on our scooters, which might have made it into the audio before. Just there's one beside us here, and we were scootering around, going off road. Man, we had no idea how to get there, so we would like go there. We'd see there'd be a bridge we'd need to cross, and we're like, shit. All right, pick up the scooters, go up on the grass embankment, get up onto the top of this bridge, and then go across. That sort of thing. So we were doing all that sort of stuff. Finally get to the protest, and then the first thing we see is a kind of booth set up, and it was talking about COVID. We're like, this is a little bit strange, like it's something to do with long COVID. It's like, I've seen this many people with long COVID but not X. So we're just going, that's a little bit strange, like I wasn't expecting that. And then we finally figure out, okay, there's kind of the main protesters going over there, and this is a guy who's got his own individual setup going on here.
Gotcha.
And he would be what I call a professional protester. So
a professional protester.
We chatted with him. He was carrying... have you seen the red Australian flag? Have you seen that before?
The red Australian flag?
Yeah. So it's a flag where it's very similar. It's got the Union Jack. I'm just trying to see if I can find it in these photos here. No. Anyway, essentially Union Jack, 5 stars instead of 6 stars, and the stars have different points, and instead of the blue on the Australian flag, it's kind of like a deep reddish color.
Okay. Yep.
And this was basically the flag before our current one, and he was saying, like, the flag got changed for no reason. We're like, okay, that kind of was put up to a vote. Yep, that's the one. Okay. How many stars are on it? Is there 6 in total?
4, 5, 6.
Yeah. Correct. So the Southern Cross, the big star underneath the Union Jack, and it only has 6 because the Northern Territory, I don't believe, was a state at the time. Anywho, we're chatting with him, and then we were just realizing, like, okay, this guy is here all the time. Yeah. So he's protesting against Expose the 28, I think it's his main thing, which is something to do with pedophilia. There's the long COVID. There was something about chemtrails in there as well.
Wait, can we just confirm what he was saying about the Australian red sign? What was he saying about this flag?
So he was saying that was the flag. So the blue flag, that got voted. That was in like a newspaper contest sometime. A popular one got chosen, and that was the flag before the blue one.
So he was wrong.
Okay.
That's incorrect. So just because I didn't know either. Actually, in 1901... there was a announcement for a competition to design a flag. 2 flags. One for official, one for naval purpose. That was the naval one.
Okay.
The blue is the Australian one. So there was confusion in the first half of the 20th century over the use of the red and the use of the blue. But in 1953, the Flags Act proclaimed the blue is the Australian national flag. The Australian red one is the official one to be flown at sea.
Okay.
So it's the sea one. So whenever I hear that sort of stuff, I'm like, dude, that's like, I'm like,
no, good to bring that up.
80% sure that this is going to be false, but
good to bring that up. He had some very like I was saying, fringe ideas with regards to certain stuff. He was one of those people where, we first talked to him about Assange, and it ended up in chemtrails very quickly.
Very quickly. Interesting. Yeah.
So it was just like, whoa, how'd we get here?
Okay.
So anyway, he was basically doing his own little mini protest on the side, and then the main one was kind of across the lawn.
Yeah.
Apparently, 1 million people were at the COVID protests, according to him as well.
1 million people.
1 million
in Canberra.
Yep. 1 in every 25 Australian was there for.
So there's 400,000 people in Australia, and there was 1 million people
in
there.
Canberra.
In Canberra, sorry, there was 400,000 people in Canberra, and there was 1 million people at the protest.
Apparently so.
There might have been some. Look, I'm not there. I didn't see any video, so perhaps you might be right, perhaps you might be wrong. I'm unsure, but okay.
I don't even think you can fit in the amount of buses it would take to fit 1 million Australians
to go down there
to get in there.
Perhaps not. Okay,
Imagine
so he
the
was.
gridlock.
So he was. It was an interesting character.
Interesting character. Questionable information.
Okay.
And
statistics might have been off.
Yep. Anyway, unfortunately, I can't find this really funny one, but it'll be posted up online, so I'll just have to describe it for you, Juan. Basically, went to the protest, started mingling with the actual people. We started chatting with some. Some people gave us some flyers and stuff, and we're basically waiting for there'd be a bunch of speakers. So there'd be some people coming down from the actual parliamentary house, so actual politicians, senators, etc. Amnesty International representative was there.
Right. Okay.
Someone, Doctors for Assange. So it was like a doctor who was formed a group, or she was part of a group.
Yeah.
Related to his, sort of mental health and what, if you've seen any of the photos from him after his time in the embassy and in his current prison, like, he does not look well.
Yeah, he doesn't look fantastic.
Look like a healthy human being. So there was a bunch of speakers there, all pretty much saying the same message, with variations of tones. Some were talking about, obviously, his health. Others were talking about they thought there might have been psychological torture going on with him there in the prisons. Others were, railing. They were quite anti-US and saying, the US are doing this to him because he's embarrassed them, essentially. Others more around the freedom of speech and being able to, not persecuting publishers, things like that. So there was a fair mix of people there.
Sure.
But there was the standout for me of the event was we were just scanning the crowd, looking around, and this guy was bending over, and the plumber's crack on this man.
It was pretty good. The
free the ass.
Free the ass, indeed.
He missed the last part of the ange bit. He was there for the free the ass.
Yeah. Yeah, there was quite a crack to be seen.
And the best bit was he was bending over long enough that not only was there time for me to run over, stand, 5 meters away, get a couple of photos in different poses, for me to go back to my brother, switch the camera, and him to go over, and then he took photos there. And the foreshadowing was, whilst we were walking around in the shopping centre, we had gotten a full blast of an even bigger ass crack.
Oh, okay.
It was a guy bending over, and it was like a Supre, so, a teenage girl's shop. For clothes. Just bending over the counter. Was like, whoa,
damn,
whoa, man! I'm not ready for this on a
Canberra with the
9:30
with the mooning.
Yeah, they care a lot about us.
Okay.
Ange there. So yeah, the look.
In the end, what was the outcome of the protest?
Look, the outcome for me was, I personally don't see the utility in going to these sorts of things. I felt.
What do you think their end outcome was? Like, what they wanted to get out of it?
Look, I'm guessing publicity is the main thing. They want public pressure to be put on a politician, in this case, the Australian Prime Minister, to be more forceful in his, I guess, negotiations with, the US president and other people involved, saying, we want Assange freed, essentially. Like, we don't believe he's done anything wrong. Now, whether our actual Prime Minister believes that, he said in the past he thinks it's definitely on the side of Assange, but...
Who, the current Prime Minister?
Yeah. He made comments before he was Prime Minister to this effect.
Right, okay.
This is from more reliable information from the actual speakers. And, yeah, it was just... I think it was politics, man. It felt like I was part of the political environment.
Ooh, getting dangerously close to the political environment.
It felt that I was losing a portion of my I don't know, just a portion of who I am in a way by sort of being there and endorsing, especially the chanting and shit right at the end.
Yeah.
So they were all like, all right, everyone get together for a group photo
To get
and then it'd be,
support.
So it was called Converge on Canberra was the actual event name. What was it was like conviction for eviction. I can't remember. There was some chant, and you were meant to chant along with it and sort of like
and
pump
support
your
it
fist.
through. Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I just went, no, it makes me feel like a puppet doing this sort of shit.
Yeah, that reminds me of like 1984 sort of stuff, you know what I mean? Like just it's the indoctrination of the words, like you got to say it this way, come on, join on board. Where I think if you believe in something so strongly or so correctly in your mind, you don't need to do that. It's like, okay, no, that's what I believe in. I'm willing to support you. I don't need to join in the chant to do so.
Yeah. So, each to their own. Most of the people there, like you were mentioning, they seemed a generally older crowd. I'd say, 40s to 70s would be the rough age range, with a couple of smatterings of teenagers and people in their 30s, but that was the most of it. And it was. I just felt like, okay, if I think of how much time I spent on this, there was 2 hours at the actual protest, probably about 2 hours of going in between, the time and money to actually fly down. If I cared deeply about it, I think there's better things I could be doing with that time. I think a more useful thing would maybe be, it'd be to the same effect. I'm not going to break Assange out of prison. I don't have contacts in, I'm not going to call up Biden and be like, yo, Sleepy Joe, help me out, help a brother out. Not that I care about Sleepy Joe either. Like, that's just a funny meme, so I don't give a shit. I just feel there'd be better ways of doing it than actually going to the in-person thing. And this kind of reminds me of when I was in Argentina and Chile, and I accidentally walked into protests in Buenos Aires and in Chile, and I noticed it was a social event. People there with beers, they were drinking, they were having fun.
It was like a more relaxed vibe.
Well, I mean, honestly, not that relaxed.
Really?
People, there was people genuinely shouting and wanting to, tear some shit down. But it was also a kind of fun thing to connect with your friends and potentially with other people. I sort of got the feeling like this as well. It was for show for the politicians. They had a reason for doing it. For the people coming, I felt it was more the social environment sort of thing. So, it hasn't given me a desire to go to protest. I don't think I'll be going to one for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't think it...
until my dad offers me to
go somewhere
else. Where
else
do you want to go next, Aaron? All right.
Yeah, I think the retelling and that always interests me. The idea, like the whole idea of, okay, go and support this particular thing, which might be in the right, to at least to your thought process. But it's that end outcome of like, where's the value in that really to be doing that? I think someone gave an example of, those people who are stopping trucks and highways because of climate change. Or like, okay, well, we're going to go on and go on the highways and stop people from going through. And then someone's just explaining it through, being like, for one, what if you're stopping a scientist who's working on climate change on the highway, and now he can't even work on the bloody climate change that you want to do? Two, like, all these cars are now just producing more pollution into the air at the same time. And it's like, okay, you did bring notice or thought to it, but how much more than already is being put on it? What extra pressure did that find to end state? And perhaps, if you have 100 people or 1,000 people putting in that amount of effort, could you have done that effort in another way that's actually way more supportive for climate change? Could they themselves have said, each one of them stop driving for a month, and that would have been a much bigger change than what they actually entailed to do. Yeah. So, I guess again there, it's sort of like, what's the end value that they did? Unsure. Is anything going to change for Julian Assange? Who knows? I actually did see, so in a little bit of a quick little search, I did see the Australian Financial Review made a post about Albanese coming into play, which is the Prime Minister for Australia now, and Julian Assange, and for the fact that he's going to have to put a view towards it, and he stated to the media, yes, I still stand to my comment around not the support for Julian Assange, but for the idea that he shouldn't be prosecuted in a sense.
Okay.
That's another way of saying
that's
that.
A politician.
That's a politician way of saying that they're not doing anything about it, right? So, but unless there is enough of a pressure that it politically impacts like someone being in power, then they're not going to do anything, because it's just like, well, why should we change that unless it's so dramatically of a piece to do? But in any case, who knows? I have no idea. Nor do I really also care what proceeds with it. But yeah, I think for me, those sort of actions to try and resolve something often for me go, I never really see one that really functions in a good way.
Yeah. So end outcome for me, what would if I really cared about this cause, what would I have done differently? I would have either spent more time in my everyday, day-to-day life trying to bring up this topic with people, and maybe, I don't like convincing people of things, but if I really cared and had a deep conviction, maybe that's something I'd sort of
go do.
Waver that rule on, bend that rule on. And financial support in another way, how, I don't know, this is where it's like, is supporting sending money to a charity that's or
maybe
a
lawyers.
That's where it gets kind of iffy, and it's like, oh, is this actually helping, or is this just trying to make me feel good? I don't know. All I can say is I came out of the protest and was saying, value wise, I don't think much happened, and if I really cared deeply, I would find other
ways or other
ways
means to do something
of supporting this.
Well, there you go. Nice. Well, I definitely. Well, that's good viewpoints. I've never seen any I don't even think I've talked to many people who have been at a protest, to be frank. Whether it was code ones or anything else. So,
you know what? I don't think I have either.
There you go, folks. The Mere Mortals are now protesters.
Not the circles that we run. New experience.
Maybe this one's just a little point that I wrote for last time. We didn't talk about it, and it was I listened to a podcast. It was Tim Ferriss talking to Noah Feldman, episode 608. And this isn't something that Tim generally posts on his podcast, which is more of the times type of podcast. So it's not an evergreen piece. And Noah is this dude who's just done he's just like some incredible person who's been doing all these different things, and is a lawyer and is a doctor and blah, 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 blah. Amazing. But they were specifically talking about Ukraine and a lot of questions around Ukraine and Russia and what's happening around that space, which I was sort of interested in. I wanted to understand what was going on, but I was more interested in that podcast of, I'd never really heard or seen a podcast where Tim's talking about more of in the moment things that are happening. And I don't know if it was in the title of the podcast or it was just mentioned quite a lot of times, but it was the signal over the noise that Tim was trying to achieve. And a few things called out to me there, which was one, that view of signal over noise. I like that. I like that perspective of trying to, of all the noise or the
cutting through the
buzz,
bullshit,
the media. It's the signal that you want to find. So, what signal should I be looking this amongst everything else that's actually appropriate? And the way that he explained it, and I assume he does in his everyday life, is that he talks to people like Noah Feldman, like a few others in his life, probably Kevin Rose, etc., who are probably really connected into what's going on in everyday life in their particular sectors, and he tries to pull the signal from them over the noise of, okay, if there's 100 articles coming out or 200 media pieces of X, what's the key things that are actually probably pretty truthful that I can extract and actually utilize for myself, and what should I just be throwing away? So, finding the 1% in there or the 2% that's like 80% of the value and being like, okay, this is awesome. So, and the way that he was asking those questions,
Burrito, right there.
the way that he was asking the way he was asking the questions to Noah, I was like, oh, this is really, really quite like something. And it made me think there's no one really in my life or even people or group that I could say I could ask to find that signal. And it got me thinking, well, one question for you. Do you have anything in your life right now that you do to try to get that signal over the noise? Because you yourself don't consume a lot of news or media. You perhaps hear it from other people. Where, if you do it all, would you say that you try to find that signal over the noise? Because for me, I would like to understand some of the core concepts that's happening in the world that I try to find the signal through. An example would be when it comes to interest rates, primarily Ray Dalio's books around, the changing markets, the long-term cycles, the world-changing cycles. It seems to be that continuous nature of it, the fact that it repeats in itself, and a more larger timescale view, I find it, that's, if I can get a lot of that content from him, he seems to be absorbing a lot of the news, a lot of the information, but find the signal over all the noise that's coming around it to a certain extent. So that's kind of an example for me.
Yeah. Look, that's a really tough one, because when I think of the shows where... how to phrase this? Okay, to answer the question, I would say probably from a podcast which is not specialized in whatever is being discussed. And this is where I really see the value in people like Tim Ferriss, like Joe Rogan, who they don't have a dog in the fight in a way, so they can get on people who they are interested in. So, for example, if you go right now to many podcasts about podcasts, for example, say you wanted to learn about podcasting, what is a podcast, how to do it, what's a good mic technique, don't go outside where there's lots of bloody, screaming kids in the background.
Screaming kids in the background, extra noises.
That sort of thing. You are very likely not going to hear about podcasting 2.0. And I think that's the real kind of signal behind all the noise. But you might hear about, you can do chapters, or maybe there's somehow you can use Bitcoin with your podcasts, something like that. Now, I found that out because I listened to Adam Curry on Joe Rogan. That's sort of my entryway to what I think is something cool. So I've listened to a shit ton of people on Joe Rogan, but probably only 10 of them really stood out for me. And same with Jordan Peterson, for example, with my general view of what's happening environmentally wise. I listened to Bjorn Lomborg on Jordan Peterson's, and Jordan Peterson's not an environmental podcast, yet he had an environmentalist or someone who was very in depth into that particular one subject, and it made sense. I didn't find him the most convincing. Another thing from the protests, I kind of disliked how people would use emotion. They'd raise their voices, "We demand action now," and then they'd purposefully leave a pause for someone to shout out, "Shame," which happened a lot. I didn't like those ones as much as I did people who were more mellow and calm, saying, "Okay, this is, we believe Assange has done this thing. He's being persecuted for this reason." They weren't trying to stir up the emotions.
Yeah, okay.
So that would probably be it. Using more reason and logic, not using emotion to drive forward an argument, and probably in a medium where there's no dog in the fight either way. So it's kind of, you need to find them not where they're likely to be found or in their own show. Sure, go there if you want to really get in depth in a subject, but like what you were doing, that sounded like a pretty good way to learn about Ukraine from someone who really doesn't talk about it that much.
Yeah, well, because perhaps they don't have a dog in the fight. They're interested, but they want to know what it might apply to broader aspects, other things in their life. Yeah, I think I struggled to where I'm default finding myself as a philosophy or as a view of okay, where can I inspect or instigate information that I can find the signal over the noise, is money.
Okay. In
the sense of, when people talk about money, you generally want to get rational into the truth, into the core point of, this is going to make me money as a company. So what I mean by that, more specifically, things like venture capital funds, hedge funds, big, super, trusts, accounts, institutions, to the point of, okay, they're looking to invest or to move towards an area, whether it's in the world perspective or specific initiatives, where they're going to make a buck for themselves. And so they don't want to be making a choice, part of it maybe, but not all of it emotionally. It's going to be, there's some rationality, there's some logic behind it. So if, say, BlackRock, is that the big one? I think so.
Yeah.
Big institution. Yeah. If BlackRock all of a sudden decides to go down a particular path where they're like, oh, by the way, in 2 years' time, we're not going to invest into any money that's related to coal or companies that have coal, and we're going to be completely going into AI, or they start talking about that, then perhaps that's sort of the signal over the noise of, that you could have a million articles saying hey, it's coming, this is what this company is doing, this is what that's saying. But then when you see the signal of, someone who's got a pretty big power in the ecosystem of it, or putting money where their mouth is, etc., okay, then maybe that's a sort of a signal that people are going to follow along. Now, that's any example. I'm trying to think of like others. I would say, like, say, if all of a sudden a lot of venture capital funds or a lot of companies and institutions that sort of are hedging, and all of a sudden everyone starts pulling money from artificial intelligence for whatever reason, and there's a lot of noise of, there's the next new thing or there's not the next new thing, maybe that's sort of a signal or a view that I'd want to understand, why all of a sudden there's all this money getting pulled from a particular place. Is it political? Is it whatever? Okay, but there's something going on there, and that maybe is more of an indicator of understanding than all the noise of what's coming out related to it.
What if it's maybe a thing where it'd be hard to link the money, so for example, North Korea, there's a good one because it hasn't been in headlines for ages. If you were coming fresh into it and wanted to really know, okay, what's it like in North Korea? Why do they do what they do? What is the decision making? What's the hierarchy there? Is it a good place? Is it a bad place? That sort of stuff. How would you go about finding that out, do you think?
Yeah, see, I guess in what we're saying, so the signal over all the noise of, you can find like just so much articles and media.
So much, man.
I think
you can find it from the North Korean side.
Exactly,
you can find it from, the anti-communist side. You can find
I think I would probably try and go down the path of finding an impartial historian, some sort of impartial historian. And again, there's going to be some influence, but I try to as impartial as it can be. And then I would try to find someone who's very supportive, perhaps, of the North Korean view. So someone perhaps who, was previously quite a lead in the North Korean space, or something that supports the reasons. And then somewhere where it's like the terribleness, why is it that North Korea is being really bad? And then in all that, be like, okay, the signals, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, and become confident with that. Now, if there's someone, a podcast, a book, whatever it may be, that has that signal or that view, and then I don't know what it'd be for North Korea, but I wish there was something out there that was really clear for that, alongside other things where I could go, oh, okay, cool, I can kind of trust that that's going to provide me the signal, rather than going and wasting my time and trying to understand 200 articles and then summarize it for myself and find out the middle ground of it all, I guess. So I don't know, how would you go about it with something like North Korea, just like another topic? It's hard. It's hard to find that signal. I guess the reason I bring it up is that was probably one of the first podcasts that I've heard. I've heard a few, but like recently that I can remember, that I went, that's a very clear signal over noise. That I went, okay, I've kind of like your dad, I look into the Moscow Daily every now and again to understand what the perspective of the Russian media is saying. I go through and I've seen lots of news articles about what's happening in Ukraine. I've seen TikTok videos. I've seen it from like the most...
TikTok's been a good source for my brother.
I've seen it from that end all the way to, properly written articles about Ukraine. I understood it in different, I guess, spaces, boundaries, capacities, whatever you may call it. But that conversation came out with, someone who understood the concept. There was no fight in it. There was just more of information and the underlying philosophy, first principles of a lot of things. I went, okay, cool. That was a really good listen. That was really insightful. I enjoyed that one. Where I can find more of that, that's, I guess, it's the hard thing. It's a challenge. So that's, I don't know if it's going to be like a goal of mine or whatever it may be, but I'm going to try and find more of those signals for me over the noise that I can try. Because again, just personally, it's efficiency. If I want to learn about, something to do with the body, with chemical balances, with training, something that I care about, from a longevity, etc. I want to find a place where I can get all my signal and information, and not have to battle through the noise of general media, articles, a million or so podcasts, my own training. Like, there's all these things. Where can I just find a little bit more cut through signal?
Yeah, that's sadly enough, I think a lot of the time you just have to do the hard work as well. There's it could be such a complicated thing where it's just you need to put in those hours to procure that. And you can't. It's not like you can trust Tim Ferriss for everything. I'm sure there's a couple of episodes you can go through him, and it turned out he had a guest on who was just talking total bullshit or things like that as well. So. Yeah, the trying to seeking of the truth, I suppose. Check out the book review I did on the recent one, Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes, and he's trying to seek the truth, and I like his starting point, I like his method, and then man, it just gets
deteriorated from there.
It
well, it seemed like it got harder at the end to kind of really conceptualize what was going on and what his reasonings there were.
Definitely harder. And it's just man, seeking out the truth is it's a tough game. It's not an easy, wipe your hands. You got one method, and it's
indeed.
Done and dusted.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure we talked about this on the podcast, but it was or maybe it was off. But the whole conversation of it was off the podcast actually. So there was that talk of China. They're pulling people's money from banks and they want to use it for something else. And I said to you, in the media they're saying the tanks are coming through it, but in reality it seems like the tanks are not there. Like they were from another perspective. So that was like my first interaction was like, hey, this is happening in China with these tanks. Then like another layer of information that I got was, oh, that's probably not actually true. Like those tanks are not actually there, etc., etc. So I was like, okay, this is whatever. But then like the next layer is someone I was listening to. It was Joe Rogan's podcast.
The
and
tanks
they said,
are doing the chemtrails.
No. Well, they were saying like, oh no, that's just false media from China saying that it's not from that, but actually is. And I was like, okay, yes, you could go back and forth on this and like mix information. I went, okay, that's the sort of stuff that I'm like, okay, that's noise. This is all noise. Where can I find the reality in the signal? And I think from that, you'd have to find someone who's like on the ground, their money's affected, they're seeing what's happening to get the truth. But something in me goes, the signal doesn't have to be the truth. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be the truth, or at least the absolute truth at the moment. The truth might change, but it might just be what is best known at the time on all the sources of information that are coming, and you have got the most logical result of it. Now, it might be not true. Like imagine if, I don't know, our Prime Minister, there was all this information going around, but someone, like the signal coming through is like, oh, it looks like our Prime Minister's a reptile. There's, 17 levels of proof. This is what's coming through. The general population of Australia thinks he's more of a reptile than not. Okay, cool. That's a signal. Yeah. That's the predominant thought, what's going through. Maybe the reality comes back and it's like, oh no, that was all false. Okay, but that's the signal cutting through all the noise. That's like the general consensus on what's going through. So even though it's not the truth, maybe it's what's coming through. So I guess I'll differentiate with that, but of course I would want it to be genuinely or mostly the truth, because then I guess you're wasting your time also if it's completely not the truth.
Yeah, it
can be difficult. It can be difficult. I think it's just it was interesting. What the other part of it for me, I went, it would be cool if I can, in some part, way or shape, make the MMW3, the Mere Mortals Web3 thing that I'm going to start doing, a little bit like a signal over the noise. Can I pass some information that's happening, both from the basic foundations of where it all came from to what's happening today, to the venture capitals, sort of companies starting to get into NFTs, into all this sort of space, to go, okay, what's the signal? Like, what should you actually care of that's us as mere mortals actually care about? Not to in-depth degree of like, in the solidity development, blah, 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 or, in this funding that's coming through from this channel and they're using these trust structures. Like, okay, that's probably not the signal. Maybe it is if you're like that specific thing, but this is not. I'm just trying to get it as a general
for
thing.
The layman,
where like, that is what I want to listen to. And generally, some of the greatest books are written because it's like, damn, I want to read this sort of book. I'm just going to I'm just going to find the information and make this book because it's the sort of book I would want to read. So I guess in this space, it's like, okay, there is a lot of podcasts out there that are like extremely good, but perhaps I'm seeking sort of a podcast that I'm going to listen to and be like, okay, that's my signal over the noise when it comes to the developments that I might care about, some of the foundational things around it and how it applies in a general context. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try to go down that path. So,
yeah. I think the other sort of related to the money part as well, knowing where the money comes from as well. So if you got a podcast or a news source or something like that, and they're not particularly saying, or it's not obvious, there's a whole bunch out there which are sponsored by, there's one called Bankless, which I tune into every now and then, not that often, but one of the reasons is because they have ads. So many ads, but at least they're kind of skippable in the way that I use it. But I can see, okay, they're sponsored by this company, by this company, by this company. That's going to have an effect on their viewpoint. They're probably, well, for one, they're not going to say much bad stuff about those particular companies. So it's also nice to know where the money or the influence is coming from. For us, it's pretty damn obvious because we just read out every single sat that we get in. And, it's not like we're doing secret deals with the coffee club behind their back, especially after Juan talks shit about them for 10 minutes straight. So that just knowing that, and there's actually an argument why I should probably check out Tim Ferriss's ads just to know, okay, what are some things that Tim might have some blind spots on or not really be wanting to explore, or things like that.
Which is interesting. Some of the things that he talks about, I think, like the ads that he does, I don't think he has brought them up in his normal podcast, or if he has, dude, I can't even like recall them really in all of the episodes that I've listened to. But so I do appreciate that he shows ads, but hardly ever talks about them on the normal podcast, which is cool, I guess. I mean, some of those things would never really come about. I think it's like one of them are like Athletic Greens, the other one's like LinkedIn. He barely, if ever, talks about those in like normal podcasts. But you're right, you've got to watch out for, where are you supporting, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, because it could be changing the way that you're articulating things. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I like podcasting 2.0, because you don't have to be in any way, shape or form influenced by anything. You can just be, this is what we're talking from our perspective, from our views, and you're supporting us through the value for value model of sending us boosts and sats and whatnot, and that ensures that we continue to be free. I was going to say like the freedom of speech, more the freedom to tell our story or our words without the influence of anything else.
Yeah, or it's just the influence is available and there, like it's out in the open. So what our Prime Minister actually thinks about Julian Assange is kind of like an obscure thing for me. He's read out a statement, I'm sure, at one point, but he's never done a 1-hour podcast on all the nuances on why and how he came to his viewpoint, and I'm sure all of the background stuff, his ministers in the background, or the opposite party thinks this, and so maybe for the polls it's better if I do this, that sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the things I'd really hate about being in such a position, amongst everything else that would suck, would be the fact that you couldn't have long, proper conversations with really anybody and tell your truth.
Well,
just in fear of...
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It'd be really cool to see if there was a politician of the future who just does that. That would be an interesting. If someone got to a real position of power in that politics sort of realm, doing that, I'd find that pretty fascinating, and I'd be willing. I'd be willing to certainly more listen to whatever they have to say than to insert your local politician here. Yeah,
like it'd be really interesting to see someone at those levels that is not a fence sitter on a lot of things, where they was like, nope, this is what I believe in, this is what I think of this is what I think of that, and there might be things that you totally don't agree with,
or even just why they're a fence sitter on some things. I really want to get Assange out, but politically, like, this is what will happen if I press too hard. This is the sort of thing that'll happen. And just lay it out like that.
Yeah, I do think that probably in the background, behind the scenes of most probably us mere mortals see, a lot of it is like, you don't really get a choice to even say the things that you want to say. Like, that is played by and supported by a lot of other people making those decisions for you on what you should be pulling and whatnot. Like, I've seen it, at least in the state government level, dude, of, even top level politicians. What they get to say is actually provided by advisors and other vetted things. You're not saying sometimes the things that come straight from their mind. It's like, no, this is what you have to say.
Yeah.
Follow it along or we're going to kick you out.
Yeah.
So it's, it would be impressive. It would be impressive to see such a thing happen. But
for sure.
I almost go like, I feel like close we ever going to get that is to tyrants or something else like that. Like someone like forces themselves onto it and then just says whatever the hell they want, and might not be as good as people think.
Well, they have a real bizarre mix, sort of. One of the reasons people love Trump, Donald Trump, was like, surely he had some say in what he was saying, because so much of it was wild and trolling and
that is true. Yep,
kind of this funny meme type shit that was coming out, and you're like, well, he probably says a lot. He probably still has a lot of people telling him to say this or don't do that, but there's some real obvious ones where he doesn't as well, which is just like, well, at least there's a little bit of the genuine leaking out. So yeah, there you go, man.
Very good. Okay, well, I think we'll pause it there. So today's podcast was definitely a little bit in depth into protests, into freedom of maybe a little bit of freedom of speech, of understanding, seeing how you can support Julian Assange and getting them out. However, we're gonna finish it off today on how you can support us, the Immortalites, how you can support us as the Immortals.
Support our asses.
Exactly. So look, the main call out for me is going to be, first of all, Fountain app. If you haven't already utilized it, you might have seen, if you have already downloaded it, of all the times we'll be calling it out, you might have seen that the Mere Mortals might have been at the top, on the header, the front page of the app.
Yeah, we're so bad at this shit that we pay the things we're promoting.
And we don't even talk about it.
Fuck.
But in any case, so if you go to the Fountain app, if you haven't already utilized it, go and play around and go and see if you can actually send through some stats. We have been enjoying seeing a couple of new faces and numbers pop up.
That's where the bulk of the stats are coming nowadays, and not just on our show, but other people's
show as well.
Yeah.
It's starting to seem like the dominant, the leader in that space. The functionality is starting to get pretty crisp, so I think people should start seeing it more. And again, make sure, if you are someone who's been a fence sitter on this and been thinking, should I do it? Maybe I shouldn't. Now, a couple of things. One, if you did decide to do it a couple of weeks ago or months ago when we said you should be doing it, one, you're up on your money because the crypto's been going up.
Okay.
Two,
not by much.
Not by much. Well, 20-something%, so it's gone up quite a bit. But in a broad sense of things, getting utilize the space, you might come up in our lists as we review it month to month of our lists of our big tally board, and I do want to see if someone can knock off the King Peter of the title. But we're probably going to be moving towards also reviewing and viewing how people are going on a monthly basis as well.
Yeah,
and so might provide a little bit more ability for people to be read out and appreciated as well.
Yeah, so definitely check out the last monthly goals, and even check out the episode, I think it's 318 of Musings, because there's an interesting tid point which was related to our topic of whether people get dragged in by the philosophy or the tech that I want to bring up. So yeah. That's my recommendation.
Beautiful. All right, well, we'll leave it at that for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this session of Meanderings, wherever you are in the world. I hope you are having a wonderful time. That's it. Juan, out.
Garnet.
Save Assange.